As I parked my car in the dimly lit basement, an uneasy feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. The flickering fluorescent lights cast eerie shadows, making the place seem larger and more foreboding than it should have been. I hurriedly grabbed my belongings and locked the car, my footsteps echoing off the cold, concrete walls. Each time I descended into that basement, I felt as if I was being watched. But tonight, the feeling was stronger than ever. My heart raced as I walked towards the elevator, its doors creaking open reluctantly. I stepped in and pressed the button for the ground floor. The descent was agonizingly slow, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just out of sight. As the elevator doors opened, a chill ran down my spine. The basement was no longer empty. A figure stood at the far end, shrouded in darkness. My breath caught in my throat as I realized that there was no way out except to face whatever was down there. Gathering my courage, I cautiously moved forward. The figure remained still, its features hidden. The air grew colder with each step I took, and the scent of decay filled my nostrils. As I got closer, I saw its eyes, glowing orbs of red that seemed to pierce through my very soul. A low, guttural growl emanated from its throat, and my heart raced. I tried to back away, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. It was as if an invisible force was holding me in place. The figure stepped forward, revealing its twisted, contorted form. Its skin was mottled and peeling, its limbs elongated and unnatural. The creature's lips curled into a sinister smile, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body refused to respond. The creature moved closer, its breath cold and putrid against my skin. And then, in a flash, it lunged at me, its long fingers outstretched. I closed my eyes, bracing for impact, but there was nothing. When I dared to open my eyes again, the creature was gone. I stumbled backwards, my heart still pounding in my chest. Was it a figment of my imagination? A trick of the mind? I didn't know, and I didn't care. I raced to my car, fumbling with the keys, before finally managing to start the engine. As I speed out of the basement, I glanced back one last time, half expecting to see the creature chasing after me. To this day, I can't explain what happened that night. But one thing is for certain, I'll never set foot in that basement again.
The relentless rain pounded against the windows as I pulled into the dimly lit basement parking of the old apartment building. I had never been a fan of underground parking lots. They always seemed to hold an air of unease, as if the shadows concealed something sinister. I parked my car in a corner, the only vacant spot I could find, and turned off the engine. As I gathered my belongings, a feeling of isolation crept over me. I stepped out of the car and into the musty, cold air of the parking lot. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows that danced across the concrete walls. The low hum of the ventilation system seemed to magnify the silence, creating a sense of isolation that sent shivers down my spine. I briskly walked towards the elevator, the sound of my footsteps echoing through the empty space. Just as I pressed the button, a sudden gust of wind rattled the nearby chain-link fence, causing me to jump. I laughed nervously, chiding myself for being so on edge. The elevator dinged, its doors sliding open with an ominous creak. Stepping inside, I pressed the button for the 7th floor. The doors closed, enclosing me in the small, metallic box. The elevator began its ascent with a jolt, its motion accompanied by an unsettling grinding sound. I glanced at the flickering overhead light, half expecting it to go out at any moment. My heart raced as the seconds ticked by, the tension in the air growing thicker. Abruptly, the elevator came to a halt, causing me to stumble. Panic surged through me as I stared at the unlit button panel. I pressed the 7th floor button repeatedly, but the elevator remained motionless. Sweat formed on my brow as I scanned the cramped space for any means of escape. A feeling of dread settled in the pit of my stomach, and I began to hammer on the doors, shouting for help. Minutes stretched into an eternity as I struggled to control my rising panic. Just as I was about to give in to despair, a crackling voice came through the intercom, sending a chill down my spine. "Don't worry," the voice said, its tone distorted and unsettling. "We'll have you out soon." I felt a mixture of relief and trepidation at the promise of rescue. However, that feeling was short-lived when I noticed something unsettling out of the corner of my eye. A faint, flickering light emanated from a narrow corridor at the back of the elevator. It was a soft, pulsating glow that seemed to beckon me. With a heavy heart, I edged closer to the corridor, my footsteps echoing in the confined space. The light grew stronger as I moved forward, casting eerie shadows that seemed to shift and contort with each step. I hesitated at the entrance to the corridor, my heart pounding in my chest. Against my better judgment, I stepped into the corridor, my footsteps echoing louder now. The walls were damp and slick to the touch, and a strange, musty smell hung in the air. The light led me further down the corridor, the shadows dancing wildly as I walked. Panic and curiosity warred within me, my instincts telling me to turn back, but an inexplicable force compelled me to continue. The corridor opened into a larger chamber, bathed in the same pulsating light. I froze in place, my breath catching in my throat as I took in the scene before me. The walls were lined with rows of doors, each one adorned with strange symbols and markings. A low, guttural chanting filled the air, sending shivers down my spine. As my eyes darted around the chamber, I saw figures moving in the shadows, their forms obscured by the flickering light. My heart raced as I realized I was not alone. I turned to flee, but a sudden gust of wind slammed the chamber doors shut, trapping me inside. The chanting grew louder, the words incomprehensible yet filled with a malevolent energy.
Darkness shrouded the basement parking lot as I descended, the overhead lights flickering ominously. The air was thick with a musty scent, and my footsteps echoed eerily against the cold, concrete walls. I hesitated for a moment, my gut telling me to turn back, but the allure of a convenient parking spot kept me going. I parked my car in a secluded corner, the dim light casting long shadows that seemed to dance along the walls. As I locked my car and turned to leave, a sudden chill ran down my spine. I glanced around nervously, a feeling of being watched settling over me like a heavy cloak. Walking towards the elevator, I pressed the button and waited, the silence broken only by the distant drip of water. The doors creaked open, revealing a rusty interior that sent another shiver down my spine. I stepped inside, my heart racing as the doors closed with an unsettling thud. The elevator descended, but instead of stopping at the ground floor, it continued down into the depths of the basement. Panic gripped me as I frantically pressed the buttons, but the elevator seemed to have a mind of its own. A sinister laugh echoed through the small space, and I felt a presence beside me, though I was alone. Finally, the elevator jerked to a stop, the doors opening to reveal a corridor that stretched into darkness. A sickly green light flickered at the far end, casting an eerie glow that illuminated rows of parked cars. Reluctantly, I stepped out, my footsteps echoing against the cold, hard floor. As I walked deeper into the basement, the air grew colder and the atmosphere more suffocating. The green light seemed to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just beyond my vision. Whispers brushed against my ears, unintelligible words that made my skin prickle with unease. I reached the source of the light, a flickering fluorescent tube hanging from the ceiling. Beneath it, a figure was hunched over, its back turned to me. My voice caught in my throat as I called out, but the figure didn't respond. Slowly, it turned around, revealing a face twisted into a grotesque smile. I stumbled back, my heart racing as I took in its features: sunken eyes that gleamed with malevolence, pallid skin stretched taut over bones, and a mouth that seemed to stretch impossibly wide. It let out a guttural sound that could only be described as a chuckle, and I turned and ran, the echoes of its laughter following me down the corridor. My breath came in ragged gasps as I sprinted towards the elevator, my mind racing with thoughts of escape. The elevator doors were open, and I didn't hesitate as I jumped inside and repeatedly mashed the button for the ground floor. The doors closed just as the figure emerged from the darkness, its unnerving grin never leaving its face. The elevator jolted into motion, and I felt a mix of relief and dread. I leaned against the wall, my mind reeling from what I had just witnessed. The descent felt endless, and when the doors finally opened, I stumbled out into the familiar surroundings of the ground floor. The basement parking lot seemed to have returned to normal, the flickering lights now steady and the air devoid of the earlier malevolence. I rushed to my car, my hands trembling as I fumbled for my keys. As the engine roared to life, I glanced around one last time, half expecting to see the figure lurking in the shadows.